The uh, the monetary laws of the Torah, as recorded in Choshen Mishpat, have unfortunately largely been disregarded, even within the Orthodox community. So we know that. That's why the last few years we've been learning Imrei Yaakov. Litigation between two Jews before a secular court is prohibited, and one who extracts money to which he or she is not entitled under Torah law is guilty of gezel, theft. The principle of dina de malchus dina does not apply when two Jews are involved, for if it would, then as the Ramah says, all the monetary laws of the Torah would be batal, null and void. While in many circles Choshen Mishpat is de facto batal, the observant individual resolves monetary disputes only by compromise or in a din Torah before a beis din. Okay, so that in itself is a very sobering prologue. However, there is one area of monetary law which affects everyone, even the majority, who succeed in avoiding disputes and litigations. This is the area of Yerusha. According to the Torah's laws of inheritance, a man's sons, if he has any, are his sole heirs, each getting an equal share, except for the Bechor, who gets a double share. In addition, the halacha provides for the widow, who can exercise one of two options. She can receive food, clothing, and shelter from her late husband's estate indefinitely, losing these rights only if and when she remarries, or she can receive a lump sum payment of the ksuva, which currently totals over $33,000. This was written in the 90s. I'm thinking maybe this was written about either 20 or 30 years ago, this document. And that's assuming that you were married as a virgin. If you were married if this was a second marriage, the ksuva is cut in half. The halacha also provides for single daughters, entitling them to food, clothing, and shelter until they mature, at a substantial dowry as well. So all of these things we've seen in Rabbi Cohen's Sefer. It is a common practice to leave a will by which a person's estate is divided according to his own wishes, and not accordance with the halacha. However, a secular will has no halachic validity, since it takes effect after death, at which time a person has no halachic power to transfer his possessions. Therefore, a person or charity designated in a will, and by the way, just to let you know, there was a campaign a number of years ago. It started in Chicago and it never really took off, but it's such a worthy thing that a person should try to leave 5% of his estate to charity. If every person would leave 5% of their estate to charity, guess what? There would not be a single Jewish institution that would be wanting for cash. All fundraising efforts would shut down. There would be no dinners. There would be no special campaigns, because there would be so much money in the Jewish community for nonprofits that we wouldn't know what to do with the money. Therefore, so a person or charity designated in a will has no halachic right to the property bequeathed to him, and may take it only if the rightful halachic heirs agree to give it to him. Obviously, leaving such a will could easily lead to gezel, and therefore it is a violation of lo yuchal levaker. A person does not have a right to reapportion. That's what lo yuchal levaker, to reapportion his estate, even though this attempt has no halachic validity. In fact, the only will recognized by the Torah is one made by a very sick man, shechiv meira, in which he divides his property among his sons in unequal or specified shares. Of course, a man can give a gift to whomever he pleases, and can even make it conditional upon a lack of retraction until his death, which would effectively give him full control in his lifetime. However, a halachic kinyan is required. There's a lot of typos. The simplest of which is sudar, which is effective for both real and movable properties. It is not effective, however, for property acquired after the gift is made, or for a person's outstanding loans. While written loans, e.g. bonds and bank accounts, can be transferred, there are logistical difficulties involved. In addition, a division by percentage, which includes future acquisitions, cannot be achieved by means of a gift. Hence, dividing one's estate by means of gifts is effective only in limited cases. Our rabbis therefore devised a different method to enable a man to arrange that a person who is not a halachic heir will receive a part of his estate. This method was widely used when it was customary to leave one's daughter half a share in one's estate, and therefore it's called the shtar chelek chatzi zachar. We've seen this. This was in the very first chapter of that book, Midor Lador. The procedure is as follows. The man writes a note of indemnity, obligating himself to pay an enormous sum of money to his daughter. And here he writes his daughter, even though Rabbi Cohen said he prefers to write it to the executor of the estate. See, so you have different ways of doing it. What? If I'm recalling correctly, he felt that there was a preference to leave it to someone who was not getting any portion in the will at all. Well, as you'll see, it's an exaggerative gift, which means that it's clearly not going to happen. So it could be to anyone. It could be made out to anyone, the gift. Uh-huh.
The designated person may or may not wear a different hat. It's hers, others.
Yeah, maybe that was his calculus. It is stipulated, however, that if his sons will give his daughter a certain percentage of the estate, then the obligation is null and void. Upon his death, the son or sons will perforce give her entire estate as a creditor. This arrangement can be implemented. In other words, the point is that if they don't abide by the way that he wants the will to be implemented, then they will have to give her the entire estate. This arrangement can be implemented to bequeath, in effect, a share of one's estate to as many people or charities as one desires, and can also be made conditional upon a lack of retraction during one's lifetime. Since secular law probably does not recognize such an obligation, and since often it cannot be assumed that the heirs will abide by Torah law, it is suggested that a regular will be drawn up together with an accompanying document containing a halachically valid will, quote unquote, with the same net results. This would avoid the halachic problems which would otherwise face the person who writes the will, the ultimate heirs, and the lawyers involved in the estate. So that's what we do. We write a regular will, and then we attach the one paragraph, which we'll point out in just a moment. The form of the halachic will. So, introduction. Jewish religious law does not recognize the validity of a will, except for unusual circumstances. One cannot arrange. By the way, we pointed out, we just said it outside, but Rav Moshe Feinstein felt that you don't have to do this. But most poskim do not agree with Rav Moshe on this. And therefore, this is why most poskim say that Jewish law does not recognize the validity of a will. Except for unusual circumstances, one cannot arrange for his estate to be divided in a manner different from Torah law. However, by creating a conditional obligation, one can achieve the same net result as that of a will and other government laws in a way which conforms to Torah law. A person who writes a will should obligate himself to pay a sum of money greater than his total assets. It is stipulated that the obligation is retractable and is not payable until one moment before death. Therefore, the obligation has absolutely no effect during one's lifetime. If one wills his entire estate to one person, for example, his wife, he should obligate himself to pay her a sum of money greater than his total assets. In such a case, paragraph 2 in the obligation form below should be omitted. If the will includes many persons, the obligation is made to the prime beneficiary or several beneficiaries. In this case, it is further stipulated that if the Torah heirs carry out the terms of the will and other government laws, then the obligation is null and void. The obligation becomes effective when the form below is executed and delivered to the beneficiary or any other party who receives it, e.g. a rabbi or a Jewish attorney, who receives it on the beneficiary's behalf, even without the beneficiary's knowledge. And the obligation is as follows. I, the undersigned, hereby obligate myself to, and therefore, if you wanted to, you could put in your wife's name, the sum of, whatever exceeds the full total value of your estate, effective immediately, but not payable until 1 minute before my death, on the condition that I do not retract this obligation at any time prior to my death. All the property which is mine at that time, both real and personal, should serve as security for the payment of said obligation. And basically what Rabbi Willig is saying, that if you wanted to just leave everything to your wife, right, and then that would, all you would need to do is just write that one paragraph. Because essentially what you're saying is, I'm not leaving anything to my kids. I'm leaving everything to my wife, assuming that I predecease her. And therefore, she'll be in charge of the entire estate. And it's not just she's in charge, it's I'm giving her a gift 1 minute before I die. Now, it depends who you want to leave everything to.
Are owners in all the property. They share countless before it leaves the husband's share. So
I don't know if that's true. For a lot of people it is, but for a lot of people,
should think that it goes to the wife, and it goes to the son. So
that's right.
Not be set to your daughter, it should be set to your wife.
That's right.
You have to have two of these. One in case if you both die at the same time, and then one case if you die first before your wife.
Right.
You have to have
Right.
both.
Well, certainly your wife should write this, should fill one out. The wife should fill one out as well. In other words, you should fill one out, basically saying that you leave everything that is yours, even the joint property. You're giving your portion to your wife. Any asset that you own, right? Even if you own it jointly, you're leaving to your wife. And it's a gift. You're giving it as a gift to her that will take effect 1 moment before your death.
It's a separate document.
It's this.
Right, you have to have two, I'm saying.
And then your wife, then your wife should have her own document. Well, what he's saying is, have a regular secular will. Have your attorney draw up a regular will. Then just add this page, the bottom of page 4, the obligation. If you're not dealing with children as far as who your immediate heir is, if it's your wife, then all you need is that one paragraph. You don't need anything else. Okay? So both of you will leave it to each other, right? And I guess you could also maybe have a second one if there's joint property. I guess maybe have the husband should write one, the wife should write one, then have a third one that I guess you could write in the event that the death would be simultaneous. Although in halacha, we don't really reckon with that. In halacha, it's same. Let's say, God forbid, a husband and wife are in a terrible automobile accident and they both pass away. One of them died before the other, right? In other words, because yes, but same. But if each one, it wouldn't matter, because since each one writes it, so either the husband was the full beneficiary based on this before, because he died a second after the wife, or she died a second after him. This is all very morbid, right? But I guess you have to deal with it, right? So I don't think you'd need to write a third one. You just would have to just have him write one and her write one, and then you're basically covered. Well, no. It depends. Look, if the husband and wife's kids are the same kids, and they are both on the same page as far as who they would like to inherit them after both of them pass on, so then one for the wife and one for the husband is sufficient. The only time it gets more complicated is if it's a second marriage and she has heirs. She has children from a prior marriage. He has children from a prior marriage. And then then in that kind of situation, you probably don't want to leave your entire estate to your wife anyway, right? Because, or vice versa, right? So then it becomes more complicated. That's why we went into that greater detail in Rabbi Cohen's Sefer. Yeah, that's right.
Now, how does the wife make, how does the wife make sure that
Well, then
her husband,
she would choose any individual. She would write the letter and name anyone. She could name the executor, the lawyer. She could name her daughter. That's according to this, it's all okay. Rav Cohen recommends having an executor, but okay. So anyway, so that's what he's saying. He says, I hereby stipulate that my heirs. Now, this second paragraph is only necessary if you're not leaving everything to your wife, but you're leaving some of it to your wife and some of it to your kids from a prior marriage and some of it to charity, et cetera, et cetera. I hereby stipulate that my heirs, as defined by the Torah, shall be given the option of paying the above obligation, or in lieu thereof, of carrying out the terms as specified in my last will and testament, and in addition, carrying out all transfers of property upon my death, which are considered non-testamentary transfers, in accordance with the laws of the state of, or the province of blank. What are non-testamentary transfers?
Things that are not included in the, so if you put all my land, but you have shares in the company, and you don't say in your will, so that would be a non-testamentary.
Okay. If my Torah heirs abide by the terms of my will and aforementioned state laws, then the above obligation is null and void. The above obligation is undertaken by a Kinyan Sutter and a based in Chashuv, a proper means of transaction in an important Jewish court. As we said, well, you don't have to make it in a based in Chashuv. Does it have to be done with a Sutter? I'm not sure. I think just signing it was sufficient. The above conditions are made in accordance with the laws of the Torah as derived from Numbers chapter 32. Oh, is that right? Oh dear. Look at that. Thank you, Barry. I'll have to send a memo. Okay, wills, halacha, and inheritance. By
so after you've done all this, you your wife and everything like that, and then someone happens to vote. So what happens then as far as weight of what is being offered to the daughter? Does it still the firstborn still have a right for more inheritance?
No.
So now can just be equal.
now, whatever you've decided in the will is how the estate will be divided up. Now, I think what you mean to ask is, what is ethical? What is proper? You can divide up your estate any way you want. Like, remember, we learned that, let's say you have one of your children, and this is very common, and it's common in a lot of families. Let's say one of your children a guy has two children. One child lives out of town and the other child lives in town. The child who lives in town has become the primary caregiver of one or both of the parents. And the parents decide they would like to leave more to the child who has decided to stay with them and take care of them than to the child who lives out of town.
they pass away.
Right. Well, that's certainly one way of doing it. That would be a good. You're right. It is a more seichelic way. I mean, it's a very good piece of advice, right? Sometimes parents have difficulty psychologically doing that because you're always worried that no matter how many millions I have, what if, I'm not leaving myself enough. So psychologically, sometimes it's difficult. So if a parent wanted to reapportion it in such a way, then they would have the right to do that. The question becomes, what about leaving? What if you have a halachic firstborn? Remember, we said it has to be male. It has to be, he was born non-cesarean, and then he's entitled by the Torah to get a double portion. Should you leave a firstborn a double portion? Or maybe not. Maybe you would say, listen, I love all my kids equally. I'm not going to give my firstborn son a double portion. That's a personal decision. We know that even Yaakov Avinu did not leave his firstborn son a double portion. He moved the double portion from Reuven to Yosef. And that's actually a big question that the commentaries deal with. But what becomes apparent is that if a person has a compelling reason to not give his firstborn son the double portion, he does have a right to do that. But he has to. But what also becomes clear is that there has to be a compelling reason. Yaakov's compelling reason is that he saw that Reuven did not have the right stuff, let's say, to be the Bechor, right? For whatever reason, I can go into that. But what if your firstborn son has been a very dutiful child and not necessarily better than your other kids, but also not worse than your other kids? Is it appropriate to leave him a double portion? That's a personal decision. It's not. Could be a recipe for disaster, but it could also be that you maybe make it known to your kids. Torah says the firstborn child gets a double portion. I want to leave my firstborn son a double portion because he's a Bechor. Or you could say, you know what? When I was a young parent, I was much harsher with my firstborn son. That's what some of the Meforshim say is that the reason why a firstborn son gets a double portion is because he broke you in as a parent. Seriously, and you made all your mistakes.
I think that Yaakov had the right against not to do their experience with their older son. It's a directive that you do.
Yeah.
How can you find?
Well, it's right there in black and white in the Torah that Yaakov moved the Bechorah from Reuven.
That means everyone has the right to do that. Yaakov is the only one in history allowed to do that. Like who has the right to do that? That's going against the whole.
Well, many of the Meforshims understand that Yaakov had a right to do that.
How did Yaakov know there was no one?
Well, he made the gift in his lifetime. So you can do what you want. But that's the point I'm making is that as long as you make the directive in your lifetime, you can reapportion the estate any way you want. But the question is, what is appropriate? What is the right thing to do? That's not easy to answer. Every family dynamic is unique. You have to make that decision for yourself. Do I want to just divide the estate if I have 3 kids, a third, a third, a third? Or do I feel that there's one child that made my life a living hell, and there's another child who was an absolute angel? And that also happens in families. And even though it might create resentment, but a parent does have a right to say that one of my children, was, never appreciated anything I gave them. Also, let's throw something else out there. Let's say one of the children had a lot of financial needs over the course of my lifetime, and I was constantly stooping them with more money because they kept coming back to me and asking me for more and more and more. And I had another child who was completely independent, and they were very low maintenance as a child, and I didn't have to constantly shtup them with money. And so I've decided, I'm going to leave that child more in, for after I die. That's a legitimate calculus, because you're basically saying I gave that one child much more over the course of my lifetime. And my estate is smaller because of all the things that I gave to that child. I bought them a house and I had to pay for their kids' tuition. And this other child was able to be self-sufficient.
Advance with all the things you get.
That's what you do, so nobody knows.
Yeah.
It's hard, yeah.
Well, that is the problem. If you divvy up your estate where you're still alive, then different taxes.
That's another situation.
No, but the point I'm making is that you have a right, based on your unique situation, to make these kinds of decisions. You don't have to leave your firstborn a double portion, but if everything else is equal, which it never is, but if theoretically everything else is equal, is it a proper thing to leave a double portion for the firstborn? Sure, because that's what the Torah says. And there may be very good reason in your situation that actually fits. Maybe not.
So, Rabbi, you said that basically the decision should be that one.
It's your money. You worked hard for it. It's like, yes, there is an idea in the Torah to leave your estate over to your children, but at the end of the day, it's yours. It's your money, and if you want to give it away before you die, you have a right to do so. Remember, we saw that story in the Gemara. I think it was Mar Zutra, who gave away a third of his estate to charity before he died, and he was justified in doing so. And every person, you should leave something over for your children, but you don't have to leave the entire estate for your children.
Today, don't leave it to someone who owes, for example, if you need extra support, or a parent, let's say, who's in a nursing home, and a kid needs to pay for the nursing home expenses. There's make an application to the court called dependent relief application. So if immediately before your death you owed a duty and they were dependent on you, but you left them out, so they're going to ask the court to say, I'm a dependent, they owe me a duty, moral, psychological, financial, whatever it says that, where they need some support, and the court can order them to say, you should have given your kid who has some condition or needs extra money, or your parent who needs this, you left them out. Let's say the kid died, was very wealthy and had a duty to support the father, mother, whatever. So the court could order them to pay out of the estate dependent relief. So support of some kind, never mind you didn't get a chilek in the estate, support would be ordered as well.
See, that to me sounds inappropriate in a number of different cases.
It's hard to test to me, but people do it.
And the court recognizes it.
You got to show that there was an obligation immediately before. It's fair, and it's all kinds of stuff. But
well, is there a way for a testator to anticipate that and to expressly counteract that? Let's say he says, I know that I've been supporting this child for the last 20 years, but that child has given me no joy in life and has always just sapped me dry. And I know that I would be doing them a disservice by making them continually dependent upon my estate.
The court looks at all holistically. It looks at all of those things, including what the will says.
All right.